chair this or this particular panel. So the panel is about basically infrastructure management in small communities. So what we've done is we've invited various participants from small communities, and what we're going to do is have each of them present their comments on issues and opportunities related to infrastructure sustainability in smaller communities. And so what we'll do is have each of the panelists present some comments. If there's some specific questions to their presentation, we can entertain those at the end of each presentation. And then at the end, we'll have time for a general discussion period where we can engage each of you. So we're going to start off here with Jeannette Austin. She's is the Executive Director for Public Works Association of British Columbia, working with the association for the past 4 years. She sits on the Asset Management BC Working Group and teaches with BCIT in the Certified Public Works Supervisor Program. She brings an additional 15 years of municipal government experience in Alberta, holding positions such as the Director of Operations, Director of Community Services, and Manager of Planning and Development for municipalities within Alberta. She holds her local government administration from the holds a degree in local government administration from the University of Alberta. Jeannette.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Don't all be so talkative. The first time I represented Asset Management BC, it was to a room full of elected officials at 7:30 in the morning. And that was a tough room. And I kind of expected, with this being the last session of the day today, that it might also be time to go to sleep. I'll try not to bore you more than I have to. So Asset Management BC is actually a community of practice. We are a working group that represents all communities in British Columbia. However, one of my passions and one of the things I stamped my feet about was that who needed us the most was the small communities within British Columbia. So hopefully none of your communities have assets that look like this. I wasn't sure if it was just that they ran out of money or that was the county line. But so we're talking about asset management and the philosophy of our working group. We took a look at the different functions that are involved in asset management within municipalities and the related professions to those. So for instance, finance and reporting, of course, is the finance department. Infrastructure management is typically public works or engineering. Of course, management is your CAOs and senior managers. We have planners, those dreaded politicians. Are any of you politicians? I might get myself in trouble. My father is now one, so I do have to be a little more careful. Of course, we have municipal and provincial local government, and then education as well. So when we look at asset management, we want to make sure we don't wave the cart down too much, but we wanted an integrated group of disciplines and users. It was important that we transfer information in between these. It was community-based, and we wanted to engage all our partners within the province. It's not an association, and there's no membership fees. So who we are is a lot of different organizations, associations, municipalities, First Nations, everything from planners to finance people. We also have Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development Canada at the table. I hate how they keep changing their name. So our singular objective was to create and facilitate opportunities to share knowledge, tools, and information respecting integrated asset management. There's an example of failed assets, for sure. Anybody here catch the storm last night? How bad was it here? Not too bad? No. Central Alberta, we had a light show last night, and our streets, haven't seen a fire truck sink yet, but lots of water. Uh-oh, now I'm louder. So as Asset Management BC, we wanted to create resources for our communities. both for the small and the large communities. We created a website, we produce a newsletter, we hold workshops throughout the province. We have an interactive chat on our website, which allows people to pose questions and get responses from other individuals. We provide information, and we have national and international contacts and information exchange. Our website, they didn't fix this. It's actually assetmanagementbc.ca, but there's documents that are available to download. I'm going to talk about some of those. They're absolutely free. Our newsletter links to other associations, as well as at the bottom of this homepage are several video casts from workshops that have been held throughout the province that you can access at no charge. So some of the tools that we have created, and again, these are all available at no charge and on our website, the first of which was an asset management policy that can be adopted by councils that helps them in their process to make their community sustainable. We created Asset Smart, which we'll take a look at in a second. We did a roadmap study, and we've done some presentations and some case studies. So the very first thing that we created was Asset Smart, and this was a self-assessment tool that municipalities could use to sort of take a look at where they were. So it was a look at where they were with respect to infrastructure and service delivery sustainability. There's sort of 5 core capacities that we took a look at, and it helped them establish a baseline for where they were as a community, and then what their end goal should be, and therefore what their gaps were. It's a very easy tool to use. Literally anyone can sit down and work through it in a day to take a look at their assets. And what this really did was help promote the dialogue and the communication within the municipalities. So this is where we first really became aware of the fact that teamwork was really necessary, and that it was important to involve all aspects of the municipality. It isn't just finance and operations who need to create this plan. We need the engineers at the table, we need operations at the table, the planners. There needs to be representatives from the entire group. The next step was the roadmap project, and we had 4 pilot communities that used this. This is a great tool that takes a look at, again, specific areas, things like where you are, the quality of your assets, the infrastructure that you have, the tools that you have available. It helps to set priorities and then develop a plan and implementation strategy. This led to an exciting project that we've been part of, and that was in bringing NAMS to BC in partnership with Saskatchewan and having workshops. We wanted to create the ability to integrate financial and technical, as well as a process for training people to use, and a very hands-on approach. So 4 small communities from BC, and I believe it was 4 from Saskatchewan as well? Initially, yeah. Participated in workshops. It engaged the staff of the municipalities directly. They were taught the process. So in BC, what happened is each community brought in one specific type of asset into the NAMS process and worked with the data and sort of went on their way to a plan. So Golden is a town of about 4,300 people. So it is considered a small community. And they wanted to move beyond TCA, tangible capital assets. They had satisfied the requirements of the PSAB 3150, and they had made their auditors happy. Well, kind of, that's hard to do, but they'd done what they had to meet the requirements, but they knew that they needed to go beyond that. So what they knew at the end of that process is the assets they had and the condition that they were in, and their comment is sort of, they knew the original and depreciated costs of all of their assets, and they knew what the remaining service lives were of them. And they went to the painful process of creating an in-house software to handle the tangible capital assets, but this was very difficult to use. So So the solution that they had created, they found to be very labor intensive. It took a lot of time and energy to collect all that data and put it into the system. The GIS data that they had was in fact very granular, and it was calculated down to pennies and millimeter levels. And at the time that seemed like way too much information, but now they're actually finding that it's coming quite handy to have. PSAB 3150 was really just a general, and it was more of a financial management and not about asset management. So they decided to participate in the NAMS project, and they, as I mentioned, participated in the workshop and adapted the NAMS outcomes into the beginnings of their asset management plans. One of the things that they learned was "it's not my job" tended to come up a lot. And definitely their group had been operating in silos. Operations was in one, and engineering was in one, and planning and finance were all in their own. So learning to participate as a team. One of the communities that I've seen do asset management the best actually spent 6 months developing teamwork before they even started on the process. So they brought that team together and did lots of those fun team building exercises. And it's also not about covering your own assets. So you can't show up to these things and try to protect your own department. It's really important that everyone understand that they're working together for the process. What Golden also learned, that it was important to be able to reassess the replacement costs of assets, and they needed to be able to adjust the life cycles based on local circumstances and conditions. One of the things that is very true for British Columbia is we have such a diverse landscape, and we have diverse environments throughout the province. So conditions are definitely not the same in the Lower Mainland as they are in the Kootenays, for instance. And so it definitely can't be treated as one. They needed to be able to extend the life of an asset instead of writing it off and start again when it had been upgraded partially through its life cycle. They needed to be able to use new technology to extend the life of assets. They had to satisfy PSAB 3150 and the accountants and the auditors. But it was actually more important to build a complete asset registry that met the needs of the tangible capital assets, but helped them develop an asset management plan based on current replacement costs. This is where, from my perspective anyhow, the rubber meets the road in small communities in particular, but in large as well. And that is taking to the community the level of service. Recognition and support for the sustainable management of the community's assets is so critical. I think as we move forward, politicians are going to find this one particularly uncomfortable. It's a little hard to run on the fact of we can't continue to afford the level of service we're offering, so we're going to have to adjust that. However, that is the conversation that we're going to need to have with each of our communities, is can we afford the level of service, and what level of service are you willing to pay for? A study was done in Hamilton where individuals weren't willing to pay $3 for an upgrade, $3 a day for an upgrade to water and sewer facilities, but they're more than happy to stop at Starbucks every day and pick up their grande whatever, costing them more than $3. So it's going to be important that we have those conversations with our communities. Developing an asset management plan that provides for the well-being of current and future generations through consistent levels of service. And again, it's having that conversation and understanding what we can afford. Our next round of NAMS, as I mentioned, it was 4 small communities that started. We'll be having later this month, some of the larger communities will be moving forward with this project as well. I think some of the challenges for the small communities are definitely staff levels and expertise. When you're talking a town of under 1,000 people, there is no engineer on staff. There's probably somebody who moved up within the ranks, and he's barely coping with the day-to-day things and certainly doesn't have time to help out with asset management. So it's definitely an issue there. Tools that they can use is one of the things that we as Asset Management BC have tried to address. The self-assessment tool, the roadmap are things that they can sit down and work on without the help of an engineering firm or consultant. We also want to start to provide mentors and people that can help them through this process, creating a network of support for the smaller communities as they move through. We definitely have the challenge of not my job, and that's something we're going to continue to have to address, I believe. So as I mentioned, the website is assetmanagementbc.ca, and again, all of the tools that we have developed, the roadmap, the Asset Smart, the policies that communities can adopt, are available on our website, free for you to download and use in any community. It's certainly not limited to British Columbia, so those tools are there. We will continue to work with our small communities in British Columbia to help them get to the point where they need to be, providing mentoring as we need to. And any questions for me at this time?
Any specific questions?
Yes.
Are you involved at the provincial level also, or just at the community?
The province is working with us on this group. They do sit on this working group as well, and so they do have a voice and have been there partnering with us along the way. Yeah.
I'm not from a small community, but I've just moved to one. I've moved to CSCE,
Oh, awesome.
and they have 2,400 people.
Yeah.
Pretty small. But my research focus is sustainable infrastructure, and I would like to help the community somehow. So how can I use this and bring it to council, let's say, and help them use this?
It might be best if we have this conversation later, so please let's do that. I'm from Kamloops, so.
Any other questions or comments? Sorry?
Your TCA, did the province set up a template for you to, to put value to certain items within that TCA? No?
No,
Really?
they did not.
Because I participate with, I'm from Alberta.
Yeah.
When this PSAP thing came up, there was a group of us that sat together with the province, municipal affairs, and you know what, we went through every piece of infrastructure, every piece of equipment that's common to everyone, put a dollar value, a unit cost to it. And that's how we were able to get, in our organization, we were able to get to it within 6 months. Once that was done, we came up with 10-year plans for replacement.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting, each province certainly has some different ways to approach things, so unfortunately we didn't, no.
I
Perfect.
guess just one comment there on the Saskatchewan side. We're, I guess, a bit unique in the sense that there's 767 municipal entities in Saskatchewan. We've got 296 rural municipalities, so like zillions of small ones. And basically what happened there was that there was a collaborative effort to get, and certainly municipal affairs played an important role there, but there was some leadership among the communities as well, and actually that group has kind of evolved to be the Asset Management Saskatchewan group, but basically wound up with an Excel spreadsheet as a template, did some pilot projects, did some workshops, did lots of webinars where people could register, and they'd go through it on a webinar, and then they would record it so they could go back to it. And it turns out that in 2 years, out of the 767 municipal entities, over 90%, I think it was 94%, had actually completed it and passed their audits. So it's, I think certainly from our perspective, an incredible success in terms of engaging at the grassroots. But it was the whole business of the pilot projects, the templates, sharing, just doing it at the grassroots and sharing the experiences and getting people working together. So, okay, we'll get on. Thank you very much. All right. Okay, our next panelist is Brian Crist. He's the Director of Operations with the City of Whitehorse. Whitehorse is the capital city of the Yukon, with a population of 26,000 people. His position with the city, he's responsible for organizing and providing direction to the city departments, including planning and development, engineering and environment, public works, parks and recreation, transit, fire, and the community sustainability plan. Prior to Whitehorse, Brian worked as a municipal planning engineer for the government of the Northwest Territories out of Inuvik in the Western Arctic region. The region consists of 12 communities ranging in population from 75 to 3,500. It is in a cold climate region, with most of the communities being very remote. The position was responsible for all municipal infrastructure, including water and wastewater, roads, buildings, and equipment. Brian also worked on construction projects in British Columbia, including the Coquitlam Highway and the Alex Fraser Bridge. He's also worked in contaminate site remediation in British Columbia. Brian.
Thank you, Dr. Sparks. So it's very good to be here. When I was asked to come down here, I was talk about sustainable infrastructure. It's a very wide open topic. So, and in my position, it does touch down on pretty much all the infrastructure in the city of Whitehorse. So, I've chosen to take quite a general approach, and my presentation, I'll just touch down on all the key infrastructure and some of the challenges and opportunities that we have. And my goal, or I guess my intent is this is set up as a panel, so hopefully it brings on some questions and promotes some discussion later on. Okay, so I need to get this thing started. So I'm going to give you a little history, because a lot of people don't know a whole lot about the Yukon or Whitehorse. So we're pretty young. There was really not much going on up in the Yukon prior to 1898. And in 1898, there was a gold rush. It's the Klondike. I know that Edmonton borrows the Klondike term for festivals and whatnot, but the Klondike really is in the Yukon. And so in this slide here, you'll see just off on the very top corner there, that line going up the hill, that's gold rushers heading up to Dawson City, up to the Klondike. And that was in the gold rush of 1898. There was 30,000 people that headed up to the Yukon at that time. And just to put some comparison to it, our population, total population of the territory now is just about 35,000 people. So, but that was the start of it. And basically people came, they came through and left. And so it was left just a small little territory. Whitehorse is further down in the territory, and there's a map. It developed as a transportation hub, and this really came to be when the Alaska Highway came through during the Second World War. So in 1942, and I think it was just over between a year and 2 years, so about a year and a half, they punched a road from Dawson Creek, British Columbia, all the way up to Fairbanks, Alaska. And so Whitehorse is on the Alaska Highway. So it's also the capital of the Yukon, and 2/3 of our population is there. I guess we've grown by 1,000 people. I've got 27,000 here but that is the latest is that we are around 27,000. We're incorporated in 1950, and that's when infrastructure first started to be built. So relatively speaking, our infrastructure is quite new. We are remote. It's definitely cold climate. It's not uncommon to go down to -40 for a couple of weeks during the winter time. And I'm going to say this right up front, because a lot of what I talk about has been impacted by infrastructure programs. So such things as gas tax, Building Canada. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with MRIF or CSCE. Even Transport Canada over the years has really helped Whitehorse and other communities in the Yukon by funding infrastructure. So I just wanted to bring that up right up front. So there's some shots of the Yukon today. It's a modern city. It's a vibrant city. It's in the Yukon River Valley. That's the Yukon River running through it. We do have a lot of heritage buildings still around, but a lot of modern buildings, as you can see, as well. People in Whitehorse enjoy quality of life. A lot of people move there for that reason, and they cherish it. And relatively young population compared to the rest of the country, and we are growing. And down in the far right-hand corner, you'll see a picture of the SS Klondike, and it's not floating anymore, but it is been restored as a Parks Canada site. So what guides infrastructure in Whitehorse? A number of years ago, I think in 2008, we undertook, as part of gas tax funding, we undertook a strategic sustainability plan. And so the tree is just sort of just a culmination of all the key points. I mean, the plan is much bigger. And significant work has been done in the meantime to integrate this plan into everything we do. So the official community plan, our building and plumbing and building bylaw plans, everything is considering this strategic infrastructure plan, or the strategic sustainability plan. So the key elements that I kind of pulled out of this that relate to this topic of infrastructure is incorporate best practices of operations. So best practices, I mean by industry standards. So it could be from anywhere. We have in the past used the infra guide that was produced a number of years ago. That's an example of what we've used. Also, reducing energy demand required by city infrastructure. So we are a cold climate. The water is cold. Freeze protection is an issue. Buildings, so energy conservation is key. Also, climate change studies. We use those in decision making. Explore district heat systems. Implement water and wastewater study. Implement energy efficiency requirements. You'll notice a common theme around energy. Improve public transit and increase ridership. And also to promote pedestrian and bicycle transportation options. This is actually pulled right out of our official community plan. The plan to be self-sustaining community, leader in energy conservation, innovation that maintains and conserves wilderness spaces, and will continue to strive to be better. And this is to be reflected in a vibrant and economy, culture, and social life. So this is also an excerpt right out of the official community plan. Our plan was completed in 2010. And I realize that that the details are very small and you'll never be able to see it. But the key part is that the land area of Whitehorse is huge. Our population is only 27,000, but we have 416 square kilometers of land within the city. So by nature, we're not sustainable. We're spread way out. And we extend 30 miles or 30 kilometers from the south to the north, and then and just through the Yukon River Valley. So we're quite it's quite stretched. And now there is an urban containment boundary around our serviced areas. We have 4 major categories of developer. First, there's the City of Whitehorse. We're not a major developer, and we tend to do more infills and densification projects, and that's a common theme within our official community plan as well. The Yukon government is our largest land developer, and they undertake all the big projects. Private developers are not so. It's a bit of a risk due to our boom and bust economy for private developers to undertake larger developments. And emerging is the First Nations of the Yukon, and within our boundaries, there are 2 First Nations, and they are, next to the Yukon government, the largest holders of land. And there is significant interest right now with two First Nations to look at developments within their boundaries and how that might look. So this also comes out of our official community plan, and you can see that we've gone from an average growth of 2.5% per annum up to 3.5 in 2008, and the last data suggests that we're still up around between 3 and 3.5% per year. And our growth is it's similar to other resource areas of Western Canada. It's been spurred on by the resource boom in Western Canada. So Whistle Bend. Whistle Bend is our newest subdivision, and it will hold 8,000 people at build-out. And right now, there is phases 1 and 2 under construction. The city of Whitehorse has done the planning for Whistle Bend, and the Yukon government is actually the developer and doing the construction. So these are shots that have just recently been taken. It's during the construction of phase 1 and 2. Some of our issues are short construction season. Some people will say that it's winter and then it's construction season. You just go from, there's 2 seasons, and that's pretty much it. And right now, if you were to look around Whitehorse, you'd see a lot of construction going on because the ground is thawing out, and it's very short. So between May and the very beginning of October is about our limits for construction. Also, contractor availability, getting good contractors and consistent contractors to come to Whitehorse and to do larger projects can be challenging. The ability to keep up with lot supply demand. So because of our boom and bust economy, right now we're in a situation where we've been left in a situation where we cannot keep up with lot supply. There's way more demand, outstrips the ability for the city or the Yukon government to produce lots. So we're in catch-up mode right now. And we're building denser subdivisions as opposed to what we used to. Our subdivisions used to be more spread out, and through our sustainability plan and our OCP now calls for more denser sustainable developments. These are great. They're definitely more sustainable, but they do have impacts due to complexities of winter operations and snow removal and such things. So in terms of infrastructure renewal, we not only build new infrastructure, but we do have a big need to replace infrastructure. So we did a major study way back in 1997 and identified 15 major upgrades that need to happen. And I think in the last couple of years, they're costed out at over $70 million worth of work. So it's a lot of work, and this is where the whole asset management comes into it. We need to replace leaking and undersized water and sewer. We need to eliminate the need for bleeding dead-end water mains. And by bleeding means just bleeding water off, more to keep the water circulating and from freezing than anything else. Also, this creates opportunities for new road surfaces and to install electrical and telecom buried lines. Also, opportunity for the city to reduce its O&M costs, and that's a big factor for us. So, we see as a renewal project, not just as the nice street at the end of the project, but less maintenance on that nicely finished street. So one of the challenges is that portions of our renewal programs, so for the surface treatments, sidewalks, curbs and gutters, and asphalt, is done through local improvement charges. So these charges are set up to share the cost with the local adjacent property owners. And it also requires support from local property owners. And this is great if everybody goes along with the project, but as probably lots of us know, that it's not a perfect world, and we don't get that. And so some of the projects that, you know, we would really like to move ahead on, we may not be able to just because there's not the community support for it. And of course, there is short-term disruptions to any infrastructure renewal project, and property owners have to bear that. This is just some slides of a recent project that we've been working on, infrastructure renewal. And again, you know, very short construction season, May to September, availability of contractors, and boom and bust economy affects costs. When contractors are in high demand, the costs go up. And when the economy goes dead, then it's easy to get contractors and the prices are better. In terms of our water infrastructure, this is a picture of our 2 Mile Hill booster station. It's one of our newer stations, built in the late 1990s. As we speak, we are building a new pump house on the front end of our system. We have 5 reservoirs for pressure and fire flow. And again, some of our challenges are deep bury. So 3 meters of depth of bury is what our standards call for at the main. And very expensive for construction and repairs, and very, very difficult when it is in the middle of winter and minus 40 degrees. So freeze protection is required throughout the system. Water loss through leakage and bleeding for freeze protection. Also, we have to constantly recirculate the water through the system. So this is a photo of an excerpt from our servicing standards manual, and also a photo of a connection of a efficient double recirculation water service to a main. And this is a new standard that we're using now. On our distribution, give you some idea of size, our average demand is about 160 liters per second, and our max demand is around 320 liters per second. We have 170 kilometers of pipe in the ground, and it's a mix of you know, AC pipe, ductile iron, HDPE. We have a mix. We do carry out leak detection throughout the system. We have full maintenance program based on best practice again. One of the another difficulty on the distribution I'm just going to make light of, it's not really necessarily directly related to infrastructure, but in terms of operations, our distribution is rated as a level 4 for distribution due to complexity. But try to get a level 4 operator, and if you've got one, try to keep them. And you know, it's a problem. And so yeah, I know it's a common problem across the country, and it certainly is in Whitehorse as well. This slide is of our groundwater system. We've gone to 100% groundwater in the last 5 years. We used to use a portion of surface water, but due to regulations, we've moved completely to groundwater. This has had some benefits on the operations side because the groundwater is warmer and the groundwater doesn't have to be treated. So that's been a benefit. But also our wells are located in, as you can see, in a residential area. So it's very important that we carry out wellhead protection plans and management plans to deal with close proximity to residences. Sewer infrastructure, again, an excerpt from our servicing standards manual, and a photo showing a common typical service with a double recirc water line, and the white line is a sewer line, and you'll note the deep depths of bury. There is a need to replace older infrastructure in many areas of the city, and we do carry out ongoing maintenance, so flushing of mains and whatnot with best practice, and we do have 145 kilometers to remain. So it's not only Whitehorse is beautiful, but we have a beautiful sewage lagoon too, so I just had to put this slide in there. Conrad was telling me, I don't know if he's still here or not, but he told me that he worked on a proposal for the city of Whitehorse way back years ago, and this is the fruits of some of his work, I'm sure. The aerial photograph is of the Livingston Trail sewage facility, environmental facility. It was built in 1995. It treats the majority of the city's sewage effluent. Does a very good job. Our effluent quality exceeds the standards. But some of our issues on the sewer system are reducing infiltration into our sewer. That's a common problem from old leaky sewers. Odor control, and this is particularly during spring when the ice comes off. And also we need to control water consumption because by controlling water consumption, it defers capital investment on our sewage lagoon system on the other end. So on the aerial shot, you can see primary, secondary lagoons, and then we have a constructed wetland area, and finally it drains into the Yukon River. Stormwater systems, outfalls to the Yukon River. Some of our challenges here are that we are in a valley, so everything drains down to the river. And new standards on the horizon, they're not here yet, but we keep hearing rumor of them. Calls for higher standards of treatment prior to discharge into the river. So this will be an issue for our city. And in addition, our climate change studies indicate that we will have more frequent outbreaks of rain and high intensity rainfalls. And this will have impacts on the size of our storms. For roads and sidewalk infrastructure, we're actually doing a fairly good job here. We do have a pavement management system in place to assess conditions of road infrastructure, surfaces, and to prioritize for repairs, upgrades, and replacement. Again, using best practice guidelines used for timely preventative maintenance roads. Our issues with pavement is really the cost. And again, this is a reason for asset management, but our pavement is really expensive, $195 per ton. Also, freeze-thaw cycles are hard on our roads. Geographical size of Whitehorse is very large, with over 560 lane kilometers of road and 120 kilometers of paved paths and sidewalks. So it's difficult to keep up with all the maintenance. And also, snow and ice control is a big part of it. It eats up a big part of our budget. Here is just some slides on some concrete sidewalks. You can see some big cracks going through some of our pararamps, and this is just part of our assessment program. And then you can see the crews busy down below there doing some repairs. That was just taken last week. So try to keep up with the repairs. In terms of building infrastructures, again, I mentioned before that our sustainability plan is integrated into a lot of areas, including our building and plumbing bylaw. And at this point, the building and plumbing bylaw calls for Energuide 80, but we've got a proposal going to our city council to boost it up to 82. And we keep looking at raising the bar in terms of requiring energy efficient buildings. Within our city corporation, we are conducting energy management plans on all of our buildings to try to get better bang for the dollar. This is a photo of our Canada Games Centre. We're quite proud of that for our size of population. We feel pretty lucky to have it. We are using some waste heat utilization here. Heat from the compressors for the ice surfaces are used for heating the pool. And again, Whitehorse's cold climate. Many of our buildings are old and inefficient, kind of slapped together, and then other future owners are left to deal with it. Also, funding for new infrastructure for public buildings is very difficult. That's our experience. A lot of the funding programs will not cover building infrastructure. Active and alternative transportation. So, again, back to our sustainability plan, called for transit improvements. We've recently done that, improved the number of buses into areas, urban areas, on a timely basis. We now have 100% accessible buses. If you live in Edmonton, you've already had that for a number of years, but for Whitehorse, this was a big thing for us to get 100% accessible buses. We also have the bike racks on the front, so we encourage people to use a combination. Transportation planning includes all modes, so we don't just look at road infrastructure as such. We look at all types. Road diets are one thing that we've been incorporating, and that's not to restrict vehicle traffic. It's actually just to allow vehicle traffic to flow, but also to consider, not necessarily have the road as the key infrastructure that it dominates everything else. It's to be worked in conjunction with everything else. So we've done such things as parking controls downtown, eliminating barriers to active transportation, and putting bike racks on the streets and lockers on the streets. Waste management, we do a little bit different than here in Edmonton. I was actually out to the Waste Management Center. It's very impressive. It was really good to take that tour as part of the CSCE today. We're different in the sense that we do source separation, and we separate out organics from the regular waste stream. Recycling is promoted, diversion is promoted. We have a goal of 50% diversion by 2015 with an ultimate goal of zero waste. We say 2040, we'll see. We do a composting program, and the city runs a compost site. Landfilling is a last resort, albeit, having said that, we still landfill a lot. In so doing, we try to maintain our landfill as best as possible. We do controlled waste and banned waste. And our landfill is becoming a regional facility, so we're taking waste from other areas of the territory simply because a larger, well-efficient and managed landfill waste management facility is better than many smaller ones. So in terms of asset management, I thought I'd just kind of do a bit of a self-assessment on where we are at as a city and what we could improve on. So what's right is that our asset inventory is complete, along with material type and life expectancy, or if we have an asset valuation is complete, both for historical and replacement values. All of our assets are tracked on GIS. Financial asset tracking is in place, and it's updated annually and shows new and upgraded assets. Condition assessments are done. Infrastructure is being replaced on a conditional-based priority, and specific infrastructure such as pavement has a very established, albeit paper-based, asset management system in place. What needs to be improved is we have a lack of standard asset management process for all infrastructure, and we don't use a standard consequence rating criteria. We do have a maintenance management system, but we have growing pains with it, and it's not universally used, so it becomes a case of garbage in, garbage out on your management system. And the databases that we do have for infrastructure and for our GIS and for our maintenance management and our financial, it's not seamless, and they don't all talk to each other, so that's a problem, and we're working to correct that. And this is just a clip off of our financial asset tracking. So we are PSAB compliant, and I do have to hand it to our accounting friends. Engineers have been trying to get this happening forever, and it took PSAB a bunch of accountants to come and make it happen. So I think it's spurred on a lot of other thought on asset management and promotion of the plans. This is just an excerpt off of our GIS, and you can see that all of our infrastructure is labeled and tagged, and So on the GIS, it's a fully functioning system. So in summary, what's bad is Whitehorse infrastructure is negatively impacted by cold climate. We're remote. The largest centers are Edmonton and Vancouver, that are 16 and 2,000 kilometers away from us. So everything is trucked up the highway. It makes things expensive. And the construction seasons are very short. What's good is Whitehorse is a beautiful city. And we have modern and high-quality infrastructure. And Whitehorse infrastructure is guided by its sustainability plan and OCP. And it's good to be guided by something that has long-term and valued visions. We follow best practices in our operations. And we do lead in many areas in sustainable development. And we continue to look for improvements. And again, a lot of our infrastructure improvements were made possible through funding programs. And that's the end of my session. So I've probably gone over.
Any quick questions? Any quick, yes?
We have the advantage down here, we got a big population to draw from funding. Up there, you've got 2/3 of your population in Whitehorse. So there must be a fairly heavy federal funding component into your overall financing.
There isn't. We do get a funding. There is a funding program through the territorial government. It's a comprehensive municipal grant, is what we get, and that can be used either on the O&M or the capital. But we have been, as I mentioned, and very thankfully, we have been quite fortunate to get some gas tax money and Building Canada money.
And doesn't that go back to people, because you still got whether it's the city of Whitehorse funding it or the government, you still got the same people being taxed. So
Right.
where's that construction? It's not being spread out. I'm just wondering how you handle that.
You'll have to rephrase that for me. I'm just not sure.
Well, down here, we've got 3 million people in Alberta.
Right.
So we've got 3 million people paying provincial and municipal taxes.
Right.
So they pool all that together, then it goes out to the municipality.
Right.
Up there, you've got 2/3, you've got Whitehorse, which is 2/3 of the people.
Correct.
So they're paying more taxes, or whatever their funding sources are.
Right.
Services, so they're getting nailed twice. They're not getting spread out as much.
Yeah, that is a bit of a problem. I know the funding programs that they do come into the territory and they're spread out. The projects are spread out to all the municipalities, but Whitehorse does get the lion's share just because of the population. But another issue that we have is that just outside of our city boundaries, there's other communities developing, and they don't pay taxes to the municipality, but they use all the municipality's infrastructure, and that's kind of a bugbear with this between the city and the territorial government. But I'm sure it's a common problem in a lot of municipalities across the country as well.
Yes. One
I think you mentioned you've got 2 First Nations surrounding you, and I think you just said they're using your infrastructures and your water. They're using your water as well.
Yes.
Any thought of a regional commission in which so that you could maybe get some money from First Nations for their consumption and usage?
The First Nations are, they are assessed and charged municipal property taxes within the municipal boundary. And they're subject to the same usage rates, so for water, as every other part of the community. So they're like, the First Nation is within the boundaries of the city, so then they follow the same taxation and usage.
I sympathize with you with the level 4 operators, because I lost a 4 and a 3.
Yeah.
Both in the private sector. So I see, in terms of operators, not only are the municipalities competing with each other for the operators, but they're also competing with the private sector.
You're very right. Yeah, very much so. And it is a problem. I wear another hat. I sit as the Yukon director for the Canadian Water and Waste Association. And that's been brought up as an issue that they want to look at and work with their regional counterparts to see if there's something that can happen.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next panelist here is Elmer Lickers. He's the Operation and Maintenance Specialist with the Ontario First Nations Technical Services Corporation. And he's a member of the Six Nations of the Grand River First Nation. He's a graduate of Civil Engineering Technology from Mohawk College and has more than 25 years' experience in working with First Nations on capital and asset management. In 1995, he joined the Ontario First Nations Technical Services Corporation and has been providing assistance and support and advice to First Nations communities on capital and operation and maintenance programs. Highlights of his career include spearheading the design and development of the computerized First Nation capital asset management system in 2000. This tool was designed for First Nations to improve record keeping, simplifying reporting, and track the condition and maintenance of all community capital facilities. The CAM system captured the interest of organizations outside of Ontario and was later implemented by the Samson Cree First Nation in Alberta and Indian and Northern Affairs Canada and British Columbia region. In an effort to capture enhanced information on housing, he led the development of the Condition Assessment and Housing Database in 2002. The Canadian Condition Assessment and Housing Database system offered First Nations the ability to track existing housing details, maintenance costs, and capture expenditures of newly constructed housing. This application also caught the attention of users outside First Nations and even led to the signing of an agreement with the former CEO and founder of Corral, Dr. Mitchell Korplad in Zim Technologies. Determined to provide First Nations with tools designed specifically for First Nations, Elmer is currently leading the development of a First Nation web-based asset management tool. He hopes to be able to provide First Nations communities with faster, more efficient data management to support operational and financial decisions making when it comes to community infrastructure. Elmer.
Take it over from here. Yeah. Thank you. Onigawahi Wes Squehone. Hello. How are you? Everybody still awake? I'd first like to thank Dr. Spark for that lengthy introductory. I guess I wrote that, but now that that's over, I hope we can continue on and make my presentation a little less lengthy. But if you wish, I can carry this over to the after party. If not, well, I'll carry on. But I certainly also like to congratulate my colleagues, Jeannette and Brian, for a wonderful presentation. Certainly a lot of similarities that are happening elsewhere outside of Ontario, but certainly outside of First Nations that have sort of drew us in the same boat as municipalities right across the country. I was reading in an article this morning in the Globe and Mail about how 63% of Canadians prepare a to-do list, and approximately 10% of those same individuals accomplish what they've been tasked to do on that list. So there's a lot of work to be done. We as First Nations organizations are challenged to accept the opportunities that we need to focus on as we take an approach to asset management. My presentation will certainly focus on Ontario, but certainly through my intro, there are interest on what we've done in Ontario that has caught the attention of other provinces, and certainly not only other provinces and First Nations, but municipalities for that matter. And as I chatted with Brian prior to the conference, there are similarities that we have as far as tasked in looking at PSAP compliance. We utilize the same resources in delivering the PSAP component to their municipality as it does to First Nations in Ontario. Looking at some of the contents of both presentations, I can feel comfortable saying that our efforts in PSAP were to some degree less challenged than I think a lot of municipalities, and I can touch on that a little bit more as I get through my presentation. What I'd like to talk about is our organization for the start, and let you know that we are driven by our chiefs in assembly in Ontario. We became incorporated in 1995 to provide the engineering and technical services to First Nations, which prior to that was delivered by Indian and Northern Affairs Canada, which is now renamed Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development Canada, which, as you mentioned earlier, that we wonder when they're going to stop changing their name, but they have an excess amount of money, so who knows. Currently, we are the only First Nations in the country that provide a regional service to all our First Nations. We have 131 First Nations, which includes a good part that are tribal councils, and tribal councils provide direct service to their affiliated First Nations. We have 6 large First Nations and 22 unaffiliated First Nations. So that diversity in demographics within our community is quite similar to the 2 presentations that I've listened to, and certainly talked to some of the colleagues here in the last day and a half. But I mean, we have communities that are as small as 300, and the community that I'm from, Six Nations of the Grand River, which is near Brantford, Ontario, and I'm sure everybody in Edmonton knows where Brantford, Ontario is. If you don't, then it's the home of Wayne Gretzky. But our community is 26,000 and climbing. We are the largest First Nation in the country. And when we look at Six Nations of the Grand River, you can look at that as any kind of municipality anywhere else in the province, in the country, for that matter. And it's evolving faster than I think what we anticipated based on new standards and new regulations that are being enforced in our environments. The OFNTSC is a technical services body that provides a series of services to our communities, and there's close to a dozen resources that our First Nations take and use our service in improving, enhancing those asset management and infrastructure environments within their communities. My area is operation and maintenance, and I always tell my colleagues that I am the hub of the organization. If it wasn't for operations and maintenance, and certainly a lot of the infrastructure wouldn't survive. Based on the profile of operation and maintenance, we certainly have a wealth of information within our infrastructure and our assets within our communities, and I'll touch on that as I get through my presentation. We have a series of partnerships, and as I mentioned, our First Nations tribal councils, and we have 4 political territorial organizations that really direct us on where and how and what we need to do. Our chiefs in assembly, as well as our partners on Ottawa, the Assembly of First Nations, are our governing bodies that fight for us tooth and nails at the HQ level and regional levels to sort of take a look at First Nations voices, and not only in the political arena, but in the technical sense are addressed when it talks about new initiatives, and more recently the new regulations on water and wastewater in the bill that's due to be passed relatively soon. So new challenges, but certainly the voices of First Nations are being heard. And I think we can, as an organization, feel proud that we're sitting at that table and voicing the opinions of First Nations and how these infrastructure and projects unfold in the communities. Our government partners, with exception of maybe the first, I seen it was a partnership within the asset management BC.ca. I think for the most part, the rest of them, a lot of municipalities have a common partnerships with a lot of these organizations. But our biggest challenge is trying to work in harmony and ensuring that those initiatives are in harmony between First Nations and First Nations leaderships and Aboriginal affairs and Northern Development. So they're our biggest partners when we take a look at introducing asset management in First Nations. They're currently in the back seat. Right now, we're in various stages of a project that will eventually put them in shotgun and move forward in delivering a product that will be, as sort of Brian mentioned, universal right across Ontario, if not shared with other First Nations across the country. We also partnership with other organizations, and I'm only just touching on the operation and maintenance side when we talk about the Canadian Network of Asset Managers and the Institute of Asset Managers, Plant Engineering and Maintenance Associations of Canada. This network of information is shared to our First Nations and to those technical experts within those communities, and are certainly taking well advantage of the information sharing. It's either done via a number of series of workshops, conferences, symposiums that we hold on, or via a portal that we have via our website. So the connection and the communication that we have right now with First Nations is probably one of the leading tools that have allowed us to gather as a group and share a common interest to our federal partners, Aboriginal Affairs. But certainly the challenges, I mean, we have a lot of remote communities, and in this particular season in Ontario, we've had a very, very mild winter, so we can expect a lot of these costs that look at project developments and transportations is going to certainly go through the roof, but those are changing demographics. I mean, you know, we talk about and we hear about operators certification and classifications and trying to retain that. We are in the same boat. We talk about the insufficient funding levels. We are in the same boat. You talk about the tax breaks issues. Well, we're not in that boat, so there's certain areas that you know, you can benefit from, and we certainly are challenged to try and opt other opportunities to seek those internal, external resources. The continuous changing in policies and government regulations, I think those are huge challenges that First Nations are opt to take. We, in the last 15 years, as far as an organization perspective, I can see that the capacity levels within the local environments and those grassroots capacities have certainly increased. The interest in First Nations taking a look at investments, whether it's infrastructure or economical gains, has increased. So there are opportunities at the local levels that you know, have evolved over the course of times, but those continuing agreements in legislation, regulations, again, if it weren't for organizations such as ours and our direction from our leaderships, you know, we may be way behind the 8 ball on this one. We still are encouraging our federal partners to look at the efforts of the cumbersome reporting requirements. And as I go through the slide here, our primary governing body is Aboriginal Affairs in Northern Development Canada. Currently, under the reporting requirements for First Nations, we're well over 160 reports that they're asking for on an annual basis. And probably, if not 60% of those reports are under the capital and O&M program. So there's a huge void from the federal perspective to try and streamline that approach for First Nations. We can't sit here and bellyache about it, so we have to sort of take a proactive approach and develop strategies on how we're going to take an active approach in complying with these reporting requirements. So under the O&M side, we partners with a number of organizations, either it's PSAB or even some industry leaders in developing asset management strategies that will help us deliver programs and streamline those reporting requirements. We recently did an infrastructure gap analysis on our in the entire region of Ontario, and in harmony with a national assessment that was done by Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development, we took it upon ourselves to do a regional assessment and draw some comparisons based on similar methodology. We certainly identified where we are when it comes to the infrastructure needs. So they're very startling figures, but the truth of the matter is that's the reality of it. So how do we address this? Well, I think the first part of the exercise is determining what really identifies those needs. And when we talked about the inventory base of O&M and condition ratings and deficiency needs, we have a wealth of information in Ontario, and we've been collecting that information for years based on national averages and so on. That was tied into the gap analysis report. End of story. There's your numbers. So pretty startling. So our roadmap, as I like to call it, and I see a common terminology across the globe, is we're wealthy with information, and we've been doing inventorying and assessments of our infrastructure for well over 20 years. And this driven by Aboriginal Affairs back in the old days, Indian Affairs and Northern Development. So, I mean, it was at one point in time considered a burden for First Nations, part of their cumbersome requirements for reporting on the infrastructure. But it was only recently under the PSAB requirements that we found the value of having that information at hand and determining that this played a big role in, one, the inventory, two, the assessment, evaluation, and three, determining what the needs are for those facilities. So it was a really good head start for us, and certainly in our efforts of complying with PSAB, it played a huge role in allowing our First Nations, and I hear some very encouraging numbers about percentages about being compliant. Well, we were up in those percentages and very encouraging. What's the next step? Well, we have to take a little bit further in-depth approach and using that information and making sure that First Nations, not only at the local level, can manage based on current needs, based on data, and based on best practices, but using that tools and those tools and that information in our lobbying efforts to address what those needs are, as I mentioned in the earlier slide. So moving forward, we as an organization are taking the lead, and as you heard through the intro, Samson Cree was interested in what we were doing as far as an inventorying and assessment of our assets, developing maintenance management strategies. BC region through Aboriginal Affairs took an interest in looking at developing maintenance management strategies based on what we had identified. And at the national level, we're working with the Assembly of First Nations to improve a current application that inventories First Nations housing. And they're currently working on revamping our application through a partnership with the University of Manitoba. So that's ongoing. So there's a lot of move forward, if you will, from our organization to help First Nations better the information and better the processes for asset management. And bottom line is using that information, as I mentioned earlier, for the lobbying efforts and credible and defensible decisions that they'll need to use and have in support of their areas for improved asset conditions and performances and resources needed in order to improve those conditions and improve those living environments within First Nations. One of the biggest components that we're looking at in some of the initiatives going on was Aboriginal Affairs approximately 14 months ago spearheaded a project out of Ottawa to go right across the country to determine what are the reporting requirements in First Nations and what could be eliminated and what could be improved. And they're currently looking at streamlining those reporting requirements, and we as an organization are part of that working group to determine what reports are valuable to the community and what could possibly either be deleted or very much redundant. So having said that, that sort of pushed us even a little bit further on our interest in asset management. We're currently in a development, and actually Monday I met with one of the project team and chief and council for one of our pilot project sites, and with the status report on where we're at with the development. We've been given the blessing to move forward with the implementation strategies, and based on that implementation strategies of a First Nations asset management system will be the drivers on and the findings of where we need to go to further the pilot project, further the implementation strategies, and further negotiate with Aboriginal Affairs to do a full-blown deployment to all First Nations right across the province. Just a few highlights on what the First Nations see, what we are introducing, what Aboriginal Affairs is sort of waiting in the wing as far as the outcomes of the pilot project. First, I think foremost is to improve the record keeping. We had a wealth of information, and we continue to have a demand from federal partners. It's not only Aboriginal Affairs, Health Canada, CMHC, and so on, but managing and streamlining reporting requirements and improving First Nations data management. Through the pilot project, when we start presenting this to Chief and Council, you kind of thought I'd be putting most of Council to sleep. They were wide awake, and they caught on real quick on how data management and knowing what you have and knowing what you need is really important. So I was encouraged that I was somehow kept the eyes open of some of the councillors within my meeting on Monday. Improve operation and maintenance funding requirements, and this is the challenge that First Nations have with Aboriginal Affairs. And more recently, First Nations that are proactive and active in that environment are the ones that are being rewarded. And it's sad to say that those that are not active in developing strategies around improved infrastructure are the ones that are being left behind. So we can focus, as an organization, we can focus our efforts on those that need resources, capacity development, or infrastructure to help improve their efforts to better operate and maintain their facilities. Those that do have the resources, my community, there's a number of communities that I mentioned, 6 large First Nations. They're very, very well ahead of the game as far as capturing inventorying and developing strategic plans and implementing approaches and so on. They're just like any other municipality. They certainly have the challenges, but they have the resources and the capacity to do it. So all we do is provide a mechanism and tools. And I certainly like the approach of assetmanagementbc.ca, which after today will be part of my resources and partners to share that information with our First Nations. So there's a lot of communities that are way ahead of the game. We talked about the partnerships with municipalities. I have a number of First Nations that border a lot of municipalities and partner not only in the infrastructure side of it, but some of the economic gains that go on with those partnerships. First Nations are in harmony with those economic gains and are building better and bigger infrastructures and more housing, and standards based on water and wastewater regulations are up to build better and more efficient water and wastewater systems. They take a look at this as an investment, and they take a look at that there is opportune time right now is to protect that investment. So things, those changing demographics are changing for the better for the First Nations. And the more tools we as an organization, and we can partner with yourselves and organizations such as our colleagues here have expressed, it will help. And I'm sort of looking forward to sharing some good stuff with them in particular the results of our pilot project and how we can move forward and give First Nations some more tools to work with. And as I mentioned, we know what we have. We know what we need. Now we're going to put all these tools together in certain strategies and implementations and the support that goes along with it. So, if there's need for those communities that are proactive in their approach, they can take that information and have very, very valid information around their lobbying efforts based on the true conditions and costs associated. So the old saying, hey, that data is worth the price of gold. Eh? So if you don't know what you have, it's pretty hard to argue your case. We're currently in a pilot project right now with one of, I would probably say, one of the industry leaders in asset management, where we adopted the infrastructure and the methodology and use that technology to build better information management systems. And it's certainly going to help our leaders and administrators improve decision makings, but ties in all the information and those acronyms on the bottom. ICMS, I mean, this information's been around for a long, long time and sort of driven by First Nations, but given to federal governments. These are Aboriginal Affairs requirements. We provide that information based on our local knowledge. The ACRS, that's years and years of asset condition reporting system. We have a lot of information around what we have, what are the deficiencies, what are the costs. PSAP, like you, we're relatively new, but we moved forward. We took the challenge, and I think for the most part, and I'll speak only on behalf of Ontario, with a great deal of success. Reports, tons and tons and tons and tons of reports. That's our biggest nemesis right now, and we're working to try and streamline that approach. That old technology, based on the infrastructure, is an application layer technology, so it's all part of the interface, but the pilot project will certainly prove to probably be quite successful and migrate into a larger pilot project, if not full implementation to First Nations right across the province. So at the end of the day, tools. Well, we have the information, but how can we assemble the data and taking a look at how this data supports First Nations infrastructure planning and the financial planning? Well, I think we're there. We can sort of put together a consistent approach across the province and put our case forward consistently through our leaders of the Chiefs of Ontario, and if not the Assembly of First Nations, then this helps us in our lobbying efforts. Locally, it helps communities manage their life cycles and their replacements. And it improves not only the assets and their land-based mapping, but certainly helps improve their quality of life within their communities. We'll focus on the reporting requirements, and I think that's probably one of the easier tasks of some of the initiatives we got going on right now. But through the earlier slide about the infrastructure gap analysis, well, it's an argument, and we'll support that argument based on current data and lobby our efforts in order to take a look at the funding requirements and what those future needs represent for First Nations. I just want to close by, we were looking at Aboriginal affairs, and I just want to close by just sort of maybe just mocking them a little bit. You know, I mean, I'm always mocking Indian Affairs, but they're good partners with us. But when we looked at our asset management system and the earlier one in 2000, which I call the Capital Asset Management System, it certainly has a bit of a pulse today, but it's being improved. The conditional assessment housing database, very comprehensive information on First Nations housing. That's being improved in partnership with our Assembly of First Nations and the University of Manitoba. A lot of good stuff going on. So I was thinking about giving Aboriginal Affairs a bit of an acronym on their own, and we call it a Digital Asset Management and Information Technology. So we call it DAMIT for short. So I'll shorten that up by just calling it DAM, but I mean, I kind of wonder what kind of support would go around in the DAM conversation. So one of the things would be, do you need a DAM account? Well, yeah, and I don't have DAM access. What is your DAM role? You know, here's your DAM URL, and I have a DAM problem. What is your DAM problem? So I think I'll probably stick with that with Aboriginal Affairs, but no. In all fun, they are good partners with us, and certainly they've given us the opportunity to be creative as an organization that will guide us and help in our communities, if not in Ontario, but certainly share the information with other First Nations. And there's just a handout I got through this assembly here about the good stuff that's going on in BC and in their active role in asset management. From coast to coast, I've been involved with other First Nations in their interest in asset management. And through the federal government, from BC to Ontario to Quebec, was very active in asset management. So they're in the back seat, as I mentioned, so they are good partners for us, and certainly if it wasn't for them, we probably wouldn't be in this position to take a look at what we do have and opt to take on the challenges to improve our environment around asset management. So with that, I'm going to thank you, and I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Dr. Spark again and the organizing committee for inviting our organization here to speak on behalf of Ontario. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elmer. Any specific questions for Elmer here before we switch gears here to general. Yes?
As a First Nations community, do you have any particular interpretation on sustainability for infrastructure and asset management that might differ from what we've heard so far?
Well, I don't think that terminology differs from any municipality than it does for First Nations. I think we're looking at the same approaches. So no, I think there's a lot of similarities in sustainability as it goes to municipalities and introducing that approach into our environments. We're challenged with those changing demographics about adopting new approaches. Those are the hardest challenges. So taking new initiatives and introducing that to the grandfather approach is going to be one of our biggest hiccups. But more and more through capacity development, we find that our younger generations are very apt to take a look at what those terminology, including sustainability, really means and how they can help and assist the implementation approaches.
Any other questions? Yes?
You mentioned about premature aging is one of the challenges. Could you expand a little bit on that?
Well, the aging technology not only is compounded by the standards that were in a lot of the early parts of infrastructure growth in the communities. So with the aging goes the lack of resources to operate and maintain. So when these infrastructures were introduced to a lot of First Nation, and I'll talk about a little bit of water and wastewater, the designs and standards weren't as sort of comparable to neighboring municipalities, and these were designs and standards driven by the level of service standards through the federal government. So we've adopted, as we grew in taking on this challenge, we've adopted those poor constructed facilities, the lack of resources to maintain those facilities, and the deficiencies that go along with it. So I think our leaders are more apt to take a look at, well, even though our challenges will be hard pressed to replace those existing facilities, we're going to take a bigger challenge in try and improve the conditions by looking at improving the facilities that currently exist, but in future build facilities are designed to better standards.
Other questions, comments? Okay, I guess I've just got a couple of comments here, and that is that I guess the one thing that struck me was this inherent in many, if not all of the comments, was basically a proactive, collaborative approach. And I guess when I kind of push the chair back and look at what's happening in Saskatchewan, and as many of you will know, we're kind of in a new reality in Saskatchewan with what's going on in terms of the resource development and that sort of thing. And when I look at, kind of the bigger picture, I think it's really clear that we're in a global world these days, like instantaneous. And so that we have to actually compete on a global basis to basically sustain our lifestyle and our economy. And that if we're not proactive and collaborative in that approach, and we're not going to be successful. And I guess the thing that I find really encouraging, well, back up a little bit. The old model, as Michael Porter from Harvard, who's kind of the guru of economic development worldwide, has put it, is that the old model was top down. And the new model, and he's got a whole slideshow on this that's available on the web, is bottom up. And so it's really all about engaging all of the stakeholders, as I described them, at the grassroots level, and then working collaboratively and proactively to determine our future, individually and collectively. And I guess the thing that I see here is a lot of that is beginning to come together, and I'm really encouraged by that, because I think, like I say, when you look at what's happening in the world and where the successes are, it's clearly that you have to have this bottom-up collaborative effort. And actually, I provoked Guy here to make a comment, and I was hoping to be able to do that. Guy?
Well, from the small community perspective, and this is what the panel is about, in order to be able to have this proactive, collaborative approach, I think that one of the prerequisites will be that people have to know that that knowledge exists someplace. I've worked with Elmer, I've worked with Jeannette, and Brian was involved in the Long Live Infra Guide initiative. But I think that what we saw here is that they are able to be proactive because they have established networks. And so how do you establish those networks so that if I need information, I just put it down on the network, whether it's the Asset Management BC forum or another one, and then we start knowing who our key resources are. And because I see the success of all these three organizations that are on the panel and others that are not here are because they have very strong networks. So how do we move to that?
Any comments?
Certainly, I think making it accessible, easy, the online forum is part of it, but it takes some time and it takes a lot of work, a lot of invitations, a lot of invites to workshops and setting things up so that, one of our successes that we went out to the province. You know, we did a tour where we went to some of the smaller communities and held workshops. That was very successful for us, so.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, it's forums like this that offer information exchange that's very valuable. Jeannette just reminded me that the Public Works Association of BC also includes the Yukon. And I probably knew that somewhere way back, but it's good to be reminded. And I'm sure that we'll have some chats and following this forum, and probably most specifically on Asset BC.
Yeah, and I certainly have to agree with both comments in response to that. But in Ontario, we're very fortunate to have a very active political body that plays a big role in how these initiatives get rolled out. We as an organization, I'm honored to be part of a regional organization that has the resources and the expertise to deliver that, and through a number of different media. So bottom line though is things are improving and the networking is improving. Funding levels, well, not so much. I can certainly sympathize with a lot of the challenges that you certainly have here, but they may be just a little less within First Nations. So we don't have the tax breaks in First Nation communities. So maybe a solution is raise your taxes so we can have more. I'm only kidding. But certainly a lot of encouraging things going on right now.
I guess I'd just add one other comment, and that kind of extension here is that certainly in Saskatchewan, the initiative that started in BC with Asset Management BC and Wally Wells out there banging the drum and that sort of thing has played well into Saskatchewan, and we've worked collaboratively on some of the NAMS projects and that sort of thing. And what that's doing is beginning to build the network, okay? It gets the people with common interests in the same room. And then among those, there are people who are leaders, and they're proactive within their communities and that sort of thing. And as they become more and more aware, you know, I'm thinking of like George Toporowski, the mayor of Shellbrook, a community of 1,500 people. You know, he's clearly providing leadership. I had a conversation with him the other day and said, you know, I think you should have a mission of making Shellbrook a showcase for Saskatchewan. And his eyes just lit up. And he said, yes, let's do it, let's get at it. And, you know, and others too. And so I think the groups like Asset Management BC and the formative stages of Asset Saskatchewan, and I believe also in Alberta, those working groups provide the forum to bring people together with the common interests and that sort of thing. So I'm very optimistic about that, and they're grassroots organizations, and I think that's the other key part. And I think the other part too, I'd just share with you, and that is that many years ago I worked on a task force on the grain handling and transportation system in Western Canada, and we did a whole bunch of background, and then we presented it to the Minister of Highways in Saskatchewan. And basically we'd mapped out pretty much what happened, okay, in terms of rail line abandonment and closing elevators and all that sort of thing. And, but that was political suicide to talk about any of that in those days, particularly in rural Saskatchewan. And he said, you know, I don't disagree with what you've done. I really appreciate all your hard work. He says, but I don't think you fully understand or appreciate the reality of political leadership. It's called, follow me, I'm right behind you. And what he was saying is that somehow we need to raise the awareness of the general population about the issues and opportunities and challenges and that sort of thing. And once they more fully understood that, then there could be more initiatives. And I think that's the same thing here in asset management, is that, you know, I talk to my family, like my daughters, about infrastructure, and they don't even think about it, as most of us don't. We go and have a hot shower, as long as you turn it on and it's hot, you don't even think about it, you flush the toilet, whatever. But the day the water main breaks, man, it's a whole new reality. And I just think if we need to somehow have an initiative that we raise the general awareness of what the issues are, and I think we as civil engineers have a responsibility in that, and how we do that, I guess, will be the topic of another debate in another day. So, any other questions or comments before we close? Yes?
I wanted to comment on that gentleman's question regarding networking. Is that what you're
Yep.
how to get that information out there? I think one of the ways that can be done is through FCM or CAMA, Federation of Canadian Municipalities,
Yep.
their conference. And the other one is probably the Canadian Municipal Administrators Association. And that'd be probably the best start there, I would think. You know, then at FCM, CAMA, more FCM, so you have the politicians there, you have your top administrator there. If forums like this are presented at that conference, then that information gets filtered down back to the respective administrators, right?
Yep.
And that's probably a good way, and as a start, to get that information out there.
Yeah, I guess just related to that is that in Saskatchewan, you know, we have the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities. That's all the councillors basically get together once a year, actually twice a year. And then there's the Urban Administrators Association. You know, there's like, I don't know, 350 of them get together a couple of times a year. And same with the Rural Administrators Association. And so since the PS 3150 thing, we've actually had sessions. It started out the PS 3150 thing, but we've had sessions about asset management and that sort of thing. So, you know, the general awareness is certainly raising. And so when there are opportunities to participate, there's more and more communities come forward. And, you know, for example, the NAMS pilot, it's going to be, actually, I think it's going on in North Vancouver this week, and in Humboldt, Saskatchewan next week. And there's 18 communities, including the ones that are participating this week in Saskatchewan, that have stepped forward and says, yes, we want to do this. And so when you get 18, then how long does it take it to get it to be, you know, 60 or 80 or 100, or away we go. So I think the train is leaving the station. It's just a question of keeping it rolling and keeping it focused. And I think it's the future looks rather bright, quite frankly, and it's because of the leadership that are provided by people like we've seen here on the panel and others here today. So I guess with that, I think it's time to call the session to the end, and I would just like to thank our our panelists for taking the time and effort to participate here is most helpful. And I'd also like to thank all of the participants here and for your comments and your participation. So forward, full speed ahead, damn the torpedoes.